about a block and a half away from the White House. As I said, I'm a lawyer up here. I'm also the president of the Free Muslims Coalition, where the organization initially started to basically advocate against the use of terror for political reasons, and then we evolved in focusing on solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And most of our focus is we believe in a shared future rather than creating two states, basically creating one state in the form of a federation or some other method, but where basically Israelis and Palestinians live as citizens of the same country. So we're going to start right now. Gentlemen, so much has happened in the last few months. We've just had the Pope finish his visit over to Israel, which some see as successful, others see as being controversial. We had him stop over at the separation wall, and which Israel did not like, and also he went over to Theodore Herzl's grave, which the Palestinians didn't like. And we also have the end of the peace process. It ended after several months. John Kerry and President Obama's peace process that ended without any solution. For many people, I would venture to guess that certainly for most Israelis, no one is surprised that the peace process failed, and certainly no Palestinian thought it was going to go anywhere. And this brings, which basically shines a spotlight on people like me, or maybe people like Rafi and others, who basically are saying, you know what, it's no surprise that this peace process based on the two-state solution did not work. Most people really don't want it. I mean, they may not like the alternative, but most people don't really want it. You have the Israelis or Jews who feel that they have a historical, emotional, and religious attachment to all of Israel, which to them includes Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank and Gaza. And I see Rafi's wife is interrupting. Hello there. And, hello. And also we have, and then we have the Palestinian who also have attachments, religious, historical, and emotional to Palestine, which to them is not just West Bank and Gaza, it includes all of Israel. So many people like me and Rafi are saying, well, that being the case, being that both sides don't really want to give up anything, maybe we should start working out the details of living together. And these are just some of the issues we're going to discuss today. We're also going to discuss the growing movement of BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. Israelis seem to think that it's just a nuisance. Others seem to think that it's a growing movement. Others seem to think that it's a growing movement that is growing, and that it's ultimately where the leaders of the movement are going to try to compare PDS to that of the South African movement. And so this is what we're going to discuss today. So let's start with the peace process. First of all, Harry, were you surprised that the peace process ended without a solution?
Of course not. No, I mean, of course, the peace process wasn't going to, fruit anything this time. It's going to take much more than the US to use some of its effort and influence as some kind of broker. The core issue is about forcing Israel to accept something. That's what all of the issues come down to, basically, with regard to Israel-Palestine. So that obviously then does bring in the issue of BDS. It brings in the issue of, well, what can and should the US do? What can and should ordinary people do? But of course, the peace process, as it's called this time, I mean, it wasn't even really a process this time. It didn't even get to the stage of becoming much of a process. It was just a game. It was just a charade. It was just something which filled headlines and could be put on people's CVs. It didn't really achieve anything. And in fact, it was really more insignificant than the previous attempts at peace processes. So, no, I don't think that...
Well, let me interrupt you there for a second, Harry. Do you think you say that it was a charade. Do you think that maybe it was a charade, or maybe it was a sincere attempt, but rather, as we said in the introduction, rather than a charade, that it was just a solution that's very difficult, that but it's very difficult to swallow for both sides.
Well,
The
no.
Israelis or Jews don't want to give up, don't want to give up Palestine or West Bank and Gaza, and Palestinians don't want to give up their right to being in Israel. Do you think that has something to do with it?
Well, I'm sure that on the Palestinian side, the Palestinian negotiators were probably well-intentioned but very naive. On the Israeli side, I don't believe that there were positive intentions. I mean, perhaps Siti Livni, for example, she actually does have her head in it, but realistically, there's no will there on the Israeli side, not in any significant way, not in any way which would actually lead to anything positive coming out from it.
Okay, Harry, but you may be right. You may be right. But the question is that I'd like you to focus on for a second. I mean, you're saying the Israelis are not serious. But the question is why? Do you think they're not serious just because they're not serious? Or is it because that maybe the solution itself is difficult? What do you say to those who respond by saying that that the problem is the solution itself, which is too difficult of a pill to swallow for Israelis and Palestinians? What do you have to say about that?
Well, on the first issue, the key here is that Israel isn't really paying at the moment a very high price. Israel's basically a great place to live. And in the domestic situation in Israel, I mean, what does the occupation really cost the Israeli population in terms of some kind of civil toll, a toll on the society, a toll on the general psyche? It doesn't have a massive toll. I mean, it might do for those who pay attention to the issues, but for the general citizen, it doesn't. That is changing, and that will change, and that toll will increase over time, but at the moment it's not a significant burden. In the political sphere, of course, it's much more of a toll, and it's more of an issue, but for the general population, it's not a massive issue. Then there's the issue of, well, the thing is just impossible to solve anyway, and that's the reason why it hasn't happened. Well, to an extent, this is true, and there's no great solution, certainly for Palestinians. I mean, basically, for some Palestinians, a successful solution would be returning all of the land to how it was 70 years ago. Well, that's never going to happen in a million years. One of the better options from that position would be to move towards a one-state solution, of course. And that also, looking at it in a realistic and politically accounted for way, that at the moment also isn't very realistic. So
why do you say that's unrealistic? From which point of view are you saying that?
It's unrealistic because at the moment Israel isn't even willing to accept a two-state solution, and its explicit policy is to prevent a binational state even from occurring.
Well, sure, but I mean, do you think? All right, so then you talk about you're talking to me about sanctions. Okay, fine, but don't you think? I mean, in South Africa, when they talked about sanctions, when they talked about boycott, divestment, but they were also giving an option to the white South Africans where they didn't have to fear. They said, okay, let's live together in one country where you have nothing to fear. We'll let bygones be bygone. We'll try to solve this. We'll share this in a way where we both can live equally. Do you think maybe the problem is also on the Palestinian side, in that they're not offering a good solution? I mean, they're offering the two-state at this point. Okay, got you. Which you're saying, and I think I agree with you, that the Israelis don't really want, or enough Israelis don't really want it. So, okay, so you're saying, well, let's do PDS. Well, but don't you need to accompany PDS with a good solution, which
absolutely. Actually, I'm not saying that BDS is the be-all end-all by any means. This is something that we should be doing, but it's not necessary. It's not a sufficient condition. A sufficient condition will be to have mass Palestinian mobility and international mobility around a particular strategy, around a particular goal. And my position has always been, and will always be, that the Palestinians themselves, most obviously living in the territories, need to sort out the disunity. They need to have elections. There needs to be an increase in civil society participation. There needs to be a real working out of what Palestinians actually want, and something which is not a pipe dream, but is something which actually could be implemented. Because the vast majority of world public opinion basically is either neutral towards the Palestinians or on the Palestinian side. And the Palestinians need to see what is possible given that context, and to run for it, to try and run for something.
Do you think the Palestinians don't really understand public relations, or they're not really taking advantage of the support they have in the world, basically?
I would say, no, I mean, I won't make a generalization about public relations, but I would say that it is true, actually, if you look at it objectively, that there isn't, in a sense, an exploitation of world public opinion. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so.
Okay, Rafi, so were you surprised that the peace process ended without any resolution?
I was hopeful that something was going to happen, but I was pretty skeptical that it would.
Why were you hopeful?
Well, because I felt like the Israeli public has sort of shifted to the point where they're willing to entertain the idea of at least a Palestinian state in theory, and they're more, you see on like TV shows, you see like Arab characters winning the Israel singing contest and the cooking contest and various things, and the relationship I see between Arab Israelis and regular Israelis has gotten to the point where it's gotten less of a big deal. You don't see people being as anti-Arabs, or the Arabs being as anti-Jews. I mean, I work with Arabs like all the time, and everyone's like high-fiving each other and smoking cigarettes together. It doesn't seem like we're under the vibe where it's impossible to resolve the solution.
But do you think the fact that they seem to be getting along more on a daily basis, that would encourage settlement of a two-state, or wouldn't that actually be against a two-state solution? Wouldn't that be pushing more towards a shared future?
It's a complicated thing. I mean, basically the way I see it is you have the supposed majority of each side supporting a two-state solution, but it's not like 90%. It's like 55% of Palestinians and maybe 65% of Israelis. So on both sides, you have this huge group of people who are totally against the two-state solution. So it sort of behooves the politicians to kind of pretend like they're lean in favor of that they're doing a two-state solution, but at the same time not actually pull it off, to not piss off this large percentage. It's not a small vocal minority. It's a huge, several million people on each side who don't want this.
I've always heard Israelis say that, hey, a large percentage of Israelis believe in a two-state solution.
Mm-hmm.
I question that, and I tell you why. When I visit Israel, Palestine, I talk to many people who say they believe in the two states. Yeah, I think if you ask people on both sides as a general, ambiguous question, do you support the two-state, they'll say yes.
Yeah.
But when you ask details,
their
versions
different
of
versions.
two-state are so
Absolutely.
different, then I don't think they are so different than each
Right.
other. That I don't even think you can say 50% supports it. I think more like 20% on each side supported two-state. Because here's what I'm hearing from Israelis as what a two-state looks like. Those who supported two-state, they're basically in support of having as much of the land as possible without the people. So they want the people, basically they'll give the land where that has the highest concentration of people, probably like Area A, which is like a quarter of the West Bank, and Area C and everything else would stay with Israel. That's what I'm hearing. I mean, when I was interviewed at the Jerusalem Post, I was actually one of the journalists. I mean, was honest enough to tell me. She says, "Well, only less than 100,000 people live in Area C, so why can't that be part of Israel? And then the Palestinian state will be in Area A, where all the people is." And so, what I'm hearing from a lot of Israelis is that a two-state to them is basically just Palestine will be where the people are. So you got Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, Beit Jala, Ramallah, these little areas, and nothing else.
Exactly.
And when the Palestinians talk about a two-state, they're really talking about every square inch of 1967. And so really, they're so part, I don't believe that the majority on both sides believe in a two-state solution. What do you say about that, Rafi? And I'll get to you in a second, Harry. I want to hear Rafi's point of view on this.
It's not the same two-state solution. I mean, Israelis would be a little more flexible and give them more territory, but the two main issues for Israelis is they don't want to pull troops out of the Jordan Valley, which basically means Palestine will not border Jordan because they've been convinced for generations that this is dangerous for them, and therefore most Israelis say, no, we need to maintain a presence in the Jordan Valley, meaning basically they can't develop it, and they're basically circumscribed in Israel. And the other big area is East Jerusalem, because we have a national holiday celebrating the recapture of East Jerusalem. Every Israeli, even the left-wing parties, are saying we believe in the united Jerusalem. It's the largest city in the country. It's even in all of Israel, Palestine is Jerusalem. Even if you took out the Arab neighborhoods, East Jerusalem, it's still the largest city here. And Israelis are like, I don't want to have a Palestinian state, 5 minutes away. I mean, it'd be like, 5-minute drive from me here. I would have the Palestinian state, and I'd have to trust them not to start attacking me. So most Israelis on these two issues, and they also want to keep all the major settlement blocks. But the Palestinians honestly would be flexible on the settlement blocks, but not on East Jerusalem. They're not going to give up the capital there, and they're not going to give up controlling the Jordan Valley, because then they don't border an external country, and they're not really free. They're just like an Indian reservation. It's basically where I wanted to, where I was thinking about going lately is I was looking into what the United States did with the situation between them and the Native Americans, and sort of there's a lot of parallels between what happened then and what sort of happened here. Like at one point that in 1871 they decided this first Indian Appropriation Act, where they basically moved all the Indians into these reservations, kind of like Area A, Area B, and they were completely surrounded. And then 20 years later, about where we are now, they basically made a second Indian Appropriation Act where they said, we're not going to make any more deals. There's no more treaties between the executive branch, between the president signing a treaty with an Indian.
No, that's true. That's true,
right?
But you mentioned, hold on, let me interrupt you for a second. You mentioned Jordan Valley and you mentioned East Jerusalem. But what I'm hearing from other Israelis, it's more than that. They don't even, they want all the empty land.
That's a bit more right wing.
All right, right wing. Okay, but and I see Ansel, my friend. He says, well, even for a one-state solution, both people have different visions of a one state. One of the commentators are making. He's saying where Palestinians may see a situation or call for a situation of equality for all, with the exception, I guess, of the right wing and the Palestinians, like Hamas, where they want the Palestinians to be in control. But he's saying the right-wing Israelis, when they talk about a one state, they're talking about where basically Israel exercises sovereignty and the Palestinians continue being where they are. But let me go back to Harry. Do you think that's one of the problems? I mean, when everyone says that, hey, the majority on both sides wants a two-state, that it may be true only in the general sense, but in reality, their versions of two states are so different that in reality that the majorities don't support the two-state solution?
Yeah, I think there are two concurrent realities when it comes to this issue, because I mean, I can't speak with any serious authority about the Israeli situation, but with the Palestinian situation, I've seen over time that there are two distinct realities. The first is almost a kind of, in a sense, a kind of mainstream political reality, which is that when it comes down to the actual polls, the polls commissioned by fairly independent organizations which ask Palestinians in the territories, do you want a two-state solution or not? Most say, yeah, I want a two-state solution, like 65%. But if you actually speak to people and find out what they desire, what they think is morally acceptable, what they think is just, what they think is practically doable even, they will not invoke the two-state solution. And there are two distinct approaches that you see. There is the one, and in a sense, these two distinct approaches, in a sense, I mean, specifically in the context of Gaza, almost run into another set of parallels as well, which is that there is the Palestinian leadership, which is in the West Bank, and which is to be seen to a large extent as being that of cronies and collaborators and etc., with working without a mandate to make compromises and concessions which are unacceptable, that kind of tallies with this two-state acceptance. And then concurrently, there is the more hardline reality in Gaza, which is a reality with Hamas and with the other militant groups affecting some control. So there are these two kind of Palestinian realities that do operate at the same time. And that's why, just by the way, just coming back to the point I was making earlier, that's why it's so important to close the gap between those two, to have real reunification, real democracy, and therefore a clear Palestinian reality which can be articulated.
Then what do you think, Harry, of the latest efforts? I mean, just yesterday I read news reports that said they actually think that the government in the West Bank and the government in Gaza may announce an actual deal tomorrow. I mean, do you think this is a good thing, or it's possible, or what do you think of this?
This is amazing. I mean, this is like the best news of the last 3 years with regard to Israel-Palestine. This is what we've been waiting for. This is one of the most important elements of the end of the Israel-Palestine conflict coming into reality, because so long as there's no unification like this, there's no hope, to be honest with you. It's as I said, it's a necessary condition.
Well, let me stop you there for a second. I want to pick up with Rafi on this, and this is something that confuses me, Rafi. Now, obviously, Israelis are very upset that the government in Gaza and the government in the West Bank are talking a possible unity deal. But one thing that confuses me about this is that in the last many years, Israelis I've heard many Israelis say, well, how can we make peace with the Palestinians in the West Bank when they're not united, or when their country is divided, or when their people are divided? I mean, Netanyahu said it, virtually every prime minister has said it, certainly many Israeli commentators say it, which I thought, the Israelis might be welcoming of a unity deal. I'm trying to understand that disconnect. Explain that to us, Rob.
Sure. Well, there's two things going on. First of all, Bibi, for example, wants an excuse not to do the two-state solution. He's running a coalition where half of the people in there want a two-state solution, half of them don't. So his best thing to do is to make it look like he tried and then not succeed and blame it on the Palestinians. He's tried saying they have to call it a Jewish state. And then the Palestinians are like, no, it affects my narrative. And it's just kind of nonsense. It's like a good excuse to break this up. And now this is an even better excuse, because then we could say, well, the Palestinian terrorists of Hamas are going to shoot rockets at us, and they don't recognize the right to exist. So that's great. They're not upset. They like this. This is awesome. This is a great excuse not to do what they want to avoid doing. It's like the kid who doesn't want to do his homework, and he's just like, clean my room now.
Well, do you think Israelis understand that Netanyahu's government doesn't really want the two-state solution? Do Israelis understand that?
I think they've been manipulated by the politicians, because Bibi's a very interesting guy. He's running a party where most of the people in there don't want the two-state solution, yet he says he does. And he's running it, and he's trying to negotiate the most right-wing version of a two-state solution that he knows the Palestinians won't accept. So he's playing the middle ground. He's got a coalition with the Bayit HaYehudi party, who doesn't want to do anything. That wants to annex all of Area C and leave them in Arabstan, basically.
So there's a comment here from our friend Anselm again, and he's saying, for Israel, the continuation of the status quo is the most rational solution. How will you change that without some kind of BDS? I mean, so Harry is obviously saying BDS is important. I'm assuming you're against BDS. So if you're against BDS, what's the solution?
I think Palestinians should demand Israeli citizenship. That's what they should do. They should just say, screw it, we're picking up Israeli flags. I'm Israeli now, give me my ID card. I'm going to the beach. Well,
all right. Well, that's fine. That's fine. I would certainly do that. I certainly myself support that. I certainly, and I would think other Palestinians would support an edited version of that, where they say, look, we'll pick up two flags, but we're part of the same country, or something like that. But okay, but how do we do that? I mean, don't you think we need Israelis to help us in order to do that? I mean, like even in America during the civil rights movement, or even South Africa during the apartheid end movement, mean, don't you think
Right.
we need the help of Israelis to march with us?
100%. The problem is also the anti-normalization movement and sort of the education in the Palestinian side, telling them that the Israelis are their enemies, like indefinitely, and there'll never be peace, and coding it with all sorts of religious symbolism. So that, like, I tried to have a meeting a couple of months ago in the West Bank with some Palestinians. We had maybe like 10 Palestinians, 20 Israelis, Jews, Arabs, and Muslims and Christian Israelis. And we were all coming to, hear their side of the story, talk about ideas about a one-state solution or throw around some ideas. And eventually we got people like Palestinian young people, like youth, started showing up to protest. And they brought a bunch of cameramen with them, and they intimidated the venue we were at, into like basically shutting us down early. So we're trying to.
I questioned someone from the PL or from Palestinian Authority about this, and they're saying, and I obviously oppose the anti-normalization. I at a minimum, either I oppose it or think it should be edited. But but here's their thinking about this. They're saying, okay, we've been involved in so many meetings with Israelis who seem outwardly supportive of Palestinian cause, but then in the end they go home.
Yeah.
They go home, and we're locked behind a wall. And when Israelis come and attack us, they don't help us. Those who supposedly support us don't help us. And what they concluded, they said, well, actually, by these people like you, I guess, is just coming to us to make themselves feel good that they're not racist. But then they go home and leave us alone in our misery. And that's how they see it. That's one of the bases for it. I mean, what's your take on that?
Me, I would. I think they should distinguish between people who just want to, sing kumbaya and forget about it, and people who are actually interested in doing something about it and try, instead of alienating those Israelis who would be like, fine, we'll give you Israeli citizenship, we'll all be friends, come hang out at the club with me, whatever. And
which Israelis would support this? Which Israelis would support this? One controversial view that I had was that Palestinians should actually, rather than approach the left, and I actually think the left of Israel, the left in Israel, I think it's much more difficult to make a deal with them than the right, because I think the way the left sees it is that, okay, they want their way of life, and they see, the Palestinians being there is a danger. Let's give them their state, even if it's 1967, get them out of here, because ultimately they fear one state. But what I'm saying, one theory I had is maybe the Palestinians should actually join forces with the right rather than the left. And I don't know about
100%.
that. Including the settlers. I mean, if you tell them, look, you want to stay here? Okay, stay here. But why don't you fight for us to have equality? I mean, is this a crazy theory, or do you think there's something to it?
That's absolutely what they should do. But the thing is, that's the group that the anti-normalization is most upset about, is when Palestinians hang out with settlers, because that's like being a traitor, which is the worst thing to do, because these are the people that want to be their neighbors. Most settlers are like, they don't want to kick the Palestinians. There's a few radicals, but a lot of them are pretty liberal. I knew people who would have events where they would invite Palestinians into settlements, and they'd sit around, sing kumbaya, talk about how we should all just live in one state together. And there's a lot of people like that. And the settlers are the ones who have something to lose, because if they have a two-state solution, there's people who are going to want to kick them out of their houses that they've been living in, some of them for generations. There's people who have grown up there, all their friends are there. They don't want to go. And they're like, I like where I live, These are the natural allies. They're people that are both sort of under siege by this process.
Harry, what do you think of what Rafi said? That maybe a solution is for Palestinians to march to Tel Aviv or try to get to the beach, even though there's a wall that prevents them, carry the Israeli flags and say, I want citizenship. What do you think of that approach?
Well, I want to say that Rafi's insights are very interesting, and it's an interesting insight. I've not heard it much before, but I think that the generals of the situation are still fairly against the anecdotes that we heard, because...
Talking about the military generals?
No, the generals of the situation. I mean, the general...
the generals, okay.
The generals, in the sense that, for example, the racism in Israeli society, the fact that there is a seeing of the other as an enemy on both sides. I mean, that is extremely ingrained. There may be a minority who actually have gone through some kind of enlightenment. But generally speaking, that isn't the case. And I think that I personally, I don't, I mean, my mind is open to this and I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I don't see any material gain for the Palestinians in trying to sort of build a coalition. I mean, if we're talking about politics
No,
here,
not the coalition. The idea of saying, you know what, give me an Israeli citizenship. I want equality. What Rafi said. What do you think of that strategy?
yeah, sure. If you mean we would like a one-state solution and we want everyone to, one person, one vote, then for sure that would be an extremely intelligent strategy, and that should be, if Palestinians actually want that, if most of them actually want that, then that should be exacted as a strategy straight away, because I think that it would be almost impossible for Israel, the actual power and politics of Israel, to reject that. Because,
well, what do you think, Ara, from a global point of view, if the Palestinians were to pursue that, what do you think? How do you think that will be received globally? Harry, I mean, you being a journalist, and you being, I guess, British, how do you think the West would perceive such an approach? Positively, negatively, better than the two-state? What do you think?
I think that if it was done in the right way and it was genuine and it was a integrous strategy, that there would be a capacity to get international sympathy. And I mean,
what's the right way in your mind? What's the right way of pursuing a one-state solution?
Well, the first would be to produce the image that Palestinians actually want this and Palestinians are united in this call. It would have to be done in such a way that it was clear that this was not racist against Jewish Israelis and that this was really a kind of, to speak rhetorically, kumbaya solution, which was genuinely being sought. And if those conditions can be met, I think that there is already enough cynicism for the two-state solution that the international community would have to get on board with it.
And you would agree an essential element of this would be that the Palestinians' use of violence, I'm not saying they're using it now, certainly not in the West Bank, but the Palestinian use of violence would have to be out of the equation completely. They would have to adopt a completely non-violent approach. Would you agree to that?
Actually, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm not advocating for either position, but I would say that that's not a massively important factor, because so far as the authorities that control the territories are themselves trying to clamp down on violence, there will always be minorities that are violent.
Harry, I understand that, but I could imagine if the Palestinians were to pursue a one-state solution, and if they didn't completely clamp down on violence, as you said, wouldn't that make it easier for Israelis to say, look, how can we live with these people when they try to kill us? How can we give them equality when they try to kill us? I mean, don't you think, at least it seems to me, I'm not Israeli, but it seems to me that, I mean, certainly from a world's perspective, it would be pretty hard to convince the world to support the Palestinians if there's not an absolute cessation of violence.
Well, it's impossible to produce an absolute cessation of violence because there are millions of people. Well, at the moment, there's no substantial violence. I mean, there is no violence right now.
Okay, but you do have every once in a while missiles coming out of Gaza, and I understand. I mean, in the West Bank, it's pretty clear, it's pretty good, but I mean, don't you think that's an essential element?
Of course, and Hamas, let's assume that hypothetically Hamas is still controlling Gaza, which, I mean, it may well not be, given this hypothetical, but if it is, of course, it would have to increase its efforts to clamp down on that rocket fire, because that would be the perfect pretext for the world not to take it seriously. But Hamas can do that. So.
One of the commentators, Dominga, said, well, violence is on both sides, and I would say, well, I agree, but the strength, that would have to be the strength of the Palestinian approach, is that even if Israelis kill them, the Palestinians should not respond with violence, because it would be much more powerful not to respond, and you can respond to that if you like. And I also want to read Anselm's comment that he just made right now also. He said Israel would absolutely panic if Palestinians in masses would seek Israeli citizenship, wouldn't they? Both Harry and Rafi, I'd like your response to that. Do you think Israelis would panic if Palestinians sought citizenship, of course without the use of violence?
Absolutely, which would be great. That's even better threat than BDS, because either it'll actually happen and they'll become citizens of Israel and that'll be cool, or the Israelis will freak out, those who support the two-state solution or are on the fence, and they would actually push it to make it materialize before they ended in this one-state solution. The best way to do it is to make friends with Israelis that want a one-state solution and actually build a group of Israelis in favor of this also. Because once there's Israelis who can vote for the Israeli government, who are, threatening at the next round to elect somebody who's actually going to give all the Palestinians Israeli citizenship, the people who are against that will be like, okay, crap, the shit's hitting the fan, we got to start separating, let's start evacuating some people. So,
I don't think that's realistic.
Well, Harry, what do you think? Do you think Israelis would panic if the Palestinians sought citizenship? Israelis, do you think the Israelis would panic?
I didn't want to interrupt fully, but I just don't see that that's realistic. I think that we're decades away from that kind of thing ever happening.
What's that? What's that happening?
Well, if we're talking about the thought of Palestinians on some kind of mass asking to become citizens of Israel, that is distinct in a sense, certainly at least in a rhetorical sense or a narrative sense, from calling for a one-state solution. They come from very different positions. And I don't think that it's even possible that you would ever get Palestinians en masse asking to be citizens of the state that's occupying them and has ethnically cleansed them. I just think that we're way off what's even imaginable, really.
Well, but isn't that where leadership comes in?
How are you going to get? Even if you had brought Gandhi back to life and gave him to the Palestinians, you're not going to get any leader which is going to convince people of that.
it worked in South Africa.
Maybe rather than say, there are multiple ways of doing this. It doesn't have to be exactly a one state. It doesn't have to be exactly carrying the Israeli flag either. There are multiple ways of doing this. Maybe rather than just call it one state, call it a shared future. Maybe the idea of being a citizen of the same country, this could be in different versions. It could be in the form of a federation or a confederation.
Absolutely.
Or,
I agree with you.
Where you tell them, look, you have your own Palestinian flag, Israelis have their own Israeli flags, but together these two states make up one country. There are different ways. And I actually think the Palestinians are missing a great opportunity. I really believe that Palestinian leadership is basically being a completely non-visionary, and I really believe that they're not thinking properly. You got, on one hand, those in Gaza who just, I think, are completely, in my opinion, useless to the Palestinians. They're not really assisting the Palestinians in any way reach any solution. Okay, they believe in military resistance, but it's not going anywhere. And then you got the Palestinians in the West Bank. They're much better, but they're pursuing a solution that they cannot make happen. And but I think this needs vision. And I would actually, if the Palestinians were a little bit more visionary, I would actually take a crack at it and go to the settlers and go to those who may be sympathetic. I don't know how many there are like Rafi. Maybe it's only Rafi and his wife, and maybe it's not even.
Depends how you frame it, but there actually are quite a lot.
Maybe his wife, he couldn't even get her to join it. But let's say there are more people like Rafi, and just say, look, guys, you want to stay? You believe this place is called Judea and Samaria? You believe that you have rights?
Sure.
You believe you want to live here? I tell you what, I'm cool with that. But you believe that Judea and Samaria is Israel. I believe Haifa and Tel Aviv is Palestine, and I'm willing to live with you, and you willing to live with me. I tell you what, I'm willing to fight to keep your settlement at Ariel, at Har Homa, at Gilo, or wherever. How about you come with me and say, Mr. Prime Minister, tear down this wall? How about you come with me to the wall and ask for my rights? I would at least try something like that. What do you think, Harry?
As I said earlier, I think that if Palestinians had a unified position and a unified strategy which was intelligently implemented, they would be able to convert the incredible international sympathy from a two-state solution sympathy to a one-state solution sympathy.
And the thing is, don't you think, Rafi? I mean, Harry. Again, I ask you this because you're in many ways more objective than me and Rafi. I mean, it seems to me when you're arguing about a two-state solution, you're arguing really at the end of the day about kilometers, about miles, about how many miles I should have, who should live where. But when you're talking about equality, it would seem like when Israelis say no, that this would go against the core of modern Western culture. Because in essence, there's no way to say no without being racist. There's absolutely no way to say no without being racist. So, I mean, don't you think people like you, when you write on these issues, maybe we should be helping steer Palestinians towards that, towards understanding this, and rather than just say, they need a two-state, we need to provide a solution. And I think, even though many Palestinians don't think like this, because they see Israelis as having all the powers, I think when the Palestinians make an offer like this, they really need to understand that even though Israelis have a powerful military, they may be scared also. They may be scared of the outcome, and you need to give them a solution that will not make them scared. That, a situation not based on trust, that even if the Palestinians are lying, quote unquote, that the Israelis will have a fail-safe method of protecting themselves. Don't you think that's necessary?
Yeah, just very quickly, because I don't want to do all the talking, but it's definitely the case. I mean, Israel's military is actually useless to it to attack a coordinated Palestinian non-violent political campaign. It's an irrelevancy. And it is the case that Palestinians are not, they don't see it like you do, and they're not activated behind a particular strategy. I mean, the millions of Palestinians in the territories, are they actually active? Are they politically active or practically active for seeking some kind of resolution? No, of course not. And if that were to change, then Israel's military would be useless facing that.
Okay, so let's go to you, Rafi. I mean, do you think you said you don't support PDS at this point? First of all, do you think BDS or the boycott divestment, do you think this is something that could expand under the status quo, or do you think this is just a nuisance for Israel?
A little of both. I mean, it has a chance to get worse, but really I think the fear of it has more of an effect than the actual amount of boycotting that would happen, since Israel has so much overwhelming support in the United States and support from other countries who don't really care, like Russia or China, who are, in terms of human rights, are like even worse than Israel. So Israel can get away with doing this for pretty much as long as it wants. That's the thing. What could change it is the Israeli public wanting something else, because it's a democracy, and we get to decide what our politicians do in the end of the day. So really the key to it, I think, is in the mind of the Israelis, or the Israeli public. And where I would go, there's actually like a movement building up amongst right-wing Israelis in favor of annexing the entire West Bank and giving everyone their Israeli citizenship.
Well, who would support that? Because what I heard is something.
There's several members of parliament that are in favor.
Name one. Because
that guy Bennett.
Okay, but that guy Bennett, I think is
not Bennett. No, there's several. Uri Ariel that's in his party. Several members of his party are in favor. Think his plan of just annexing Area C isn't really going to work out, and they should take the whole thing. Right. So, but I actually think. I mean, I was thinking about what happened with the Native Americans in the United States, and it's very much a parallel. At one point, the U.S. they made a law saying they're not going to negotiate any additional territory to the Indians, and it took a full 50 years later until they did the Indian Citizenship Act, where they basically just said, you know what, these aren't really independent countries, they're never going to be countries, they're completely surrounded by the United States, so just give them American citizenship. And they still had their reservations, and we could use something similar. We could just say, we're giving everyone in the West Bank Israeli citizenship, but they still have some kind of autonomy in Area B and Area A, like a Native American reservation or something, and they could have their own school system there or whatever. But meanwhile, they're all carrying Israeli passports. They have the same access to the courts. They can vote for their, representatives of parliament. They can get on a plane. They can go and come as they like. And they have the same rights as me. And that's really what they seek. They don't have to say, I'm going to get rid of calling myself a Palestinian. They'll also be, just like a Native American, you can also be a Cherokee and an American citizen. You can be a Palestinian Israeli. It's more practical when you got to the point where the Israelis basically don't want to separate to the point where they're going to actually let them have an independent state that borders another country that's not going to be completely surrounded and divided up.
I guess the way, you and I, Rafi, I came and did the conference in Israel, Palestine, I don't know, I guess it's been 3 years now. And I've known there are people like Joe Avisar, Yehuda Schwartz, and others who genuinely believe this one-state idea.
Sure.
But they don't really know, and we don't really know what the next step is. We just don't have, we haven't been able to get beyond making posts on Facebook. Do you have any idea of how we can get to the next step?
I think they should move on to this sort of build up in the right wing camp in favor of annexing the whole West Bank, which doesn't solve all the problems, but it gives citizenship to a 1.5 million plus people who can now vote, and we can move a step forward. It's saying we're not necessarily going to have like John Kerry's plan. We're going to have an end of conflict and resolve everything.
Would the proposal have to come from Israel, or would the proposal have to come from the Palestinians?
Well, the Palestinians in the West Bank could say that's what we want also, and then you have a team up of right-wing Israelis who are saying this, and then the left-wingers are like, you're crazy, the Palestinians hate us, and then
do you think Netanyahu would accept this?
Possibly, but I don't know if Netanyahu is the best one to get into this. They may have to get other parties to push this agenda, because ultimately Netanyahu likes to keep his job. So, if that's where the public is leaning, he could do that. And if you were just to annex the West Bank, Israel would still sort of have this Jewish majority. They could hold on to this idea of Israel, at least for the time being. And meanwhile, the next election season, we're going to elect a government that's going to look a lot different than the one that we have right now. If we have another 1.5 million Palestinian voters, it's going to be a different.
Yeah, maybe they can start with the West Bank, and basically, and Israel can help develop the infrastructure for the West Bank, and maybe if the people of Gaza or Hamas saw that this could work out,
they would jump on board.
They can jump on board later. They can see that, hey, this is not a trick, that this can work, and this could minimize Hamas. Let's move on to the Pope's trip. Harry, what do you think of the Pope's trip?
I think that the Palestinians scored one over the Israelis on this. I wouldn't say it was a massive win. I think at the time it felt like a massive win to have the Pope make this impromptu stop by the wall. If you went to the West Bank, would you stop by the wall? Yeah, for sure. If people, generally speaking, from the world went to the West Bank, would they stop and look at the wall? Yeah, sure. So I think that we have to be realistic about objectively how much of a big deal this was.
Where do you live? Do you live in London, Harry?
At the moment, I live in Oxfordshire, but I'm hoping to be back in Gaza in 9 weeks.
Well, the reason I ask is, I watched the coverage of the Pope with substantial detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that the coverage of the Pope's trip in almost every other country was very different than the way it was covered in the United States.
Of course.
In the United States, it wasn't really covered that much, first of all. And it was just so completely different. For example, in other countries, let's say they talk about when he stopped at the wall. The other countries, of course, first of all, made a big deal at the fact that he landed in Bethlehem first before he went to Israel.
Yeah.
That in itself, people made a big deal out of it. It was rarely mentioned in the U.S. Then in other countries, basically the primary picture that was shown is that of the Pope at the wall. Mm-hmm. And then even when Israel tried to I guess, correct that by inviting him to go to the terror museum, I guess. In other countries, that they said just that. They said, well, Israel was trying to help its image by taking him to the terror museum. So, in almost every country except the U.S., it seemed like the way the coverage was, it made it seem like the Pope was pro-Palestinian. In the U.S., it just didn't come out that way at all. It was given like 10 seconds of coverage, and it says, and they even said when he landed in Bethlehem, they said the Pope landed in Israel, and then and blah blah blah, and his first stop in Israel was Bethlehem, and so on. So I was wondering how the coverage was in London or in England.
It was like you described. I guess that generally speaking, the non-US coverage is pretty much the same. As you said, they referred to the significance of him going to Jordan and then going to the West Bank and then going to Israel before flying home. Those kind of scores that the Palestinians won over Israel during the visit, I think they were mentioned, and I think even you could see on the face of the foreign correspondents and the news anchors, in a sense, the kind of a smile that the Palestinians have won this as a PR exercise, and that it's of significance. And in a sense, almost the subtext was, well, finally someone with some significance has done something for the Palestinians. However, as I said, I think objectively it's not that much of a big deal, and it shows already in what a poor situation the Palestinians were from a PR point of view.
Yeah, how was this covered in Israel, Rafi?
I mean, compared to America, America is more right-wing on Israel than Israel. We saw that he went to the wall. He was covered like heavily for a couple days. That he went to the Western Wall. He went to this place, and it didn't really faze anybody. The fact that he went to the wall. We've all seen the wall. I can see the wall on my porch here, so it's not such a big deal. But people were really happy and excited that he's coming, and he was promoting this two-state solution in peace, which is just like Obama did. Nobody saw it as really much different. It's not like, oh, he was so pro-Palestinian. He's like pro it. Tzipi Livni, those people are pro. So
yeah, but
it didn't really faze anybody.
There were articles I read by Israeli commentators that saw this as a terrible, terrible thing. I think there's a woman named Glickman, I think is her name. She writes for the...
Caroline Glick, yeah.
I mean, she's like
the most right-wing person in Israel, but she wrote the book about how to annex the West Bank, so she's in favor of what I'm saying.
I was surprised
but she's a right-wing fanatic on the other hand.
I mean, it seemed like her big deal was, which was bizarre. She actually made me watch it. She wrote an article on how the Pope, I thought I'm seeing something here. I don't get it. The Pope and Zivi Livni. Okay. I saw the. She made a huge deal that somehow the Pope disagreed with Netanyahu on what language Jesus spoke, and she thought this was an insult, and I'm thinking like this was an insult to Netanyahu, and so then I went and watched it, and it seemed like they were joking, both Netanyahu and the Pope. It was not a serious event at all, and she made it seem like this huge smack in the face of Israel, and I just didn't get that whatsoever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think she's reading too much into it. He said that Jesus spoke Hebrew, and the Pope was like, no, he spoke Aramaic, and he was like, but he also knew Hebrew. So then I was just like giggling about it.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of a joke. It was like even like, hey, pass the joint.
Yeah.
kind of thing. but all right. So, anything else you think we haven't covered on this before we wrap up that y'all want to conclude with? Any topic you think we should discuss on this issue? But I did read an article that was actually interesting, written by an American evangelical right-wing person, and he's saying actually even among evangelical churches, and this should be our last topic actually. I noticed in the last couple of months, Israel passed this law where they don't consider Christian Palestinians or Christian Arabs to be Arabs, What's that all about, Rafi? Do you know about that?
I mean, it's the whole issue of Israel's identity as a Jewish and democratic state, and they were basically trying to divide the Arabs into Christians and into Muslims, because they generally the Christians here are less hostile against the Jews, and they were trying to get some of the Palestinians at least to like them. So they figured if they stopped calling themselves Arabs, that would start meaning something, which is it's kind of silly. But basically, they were trying to get more Israeli Christians to join the army and sort of integrate into Israeli society, and they feel that that would be somewhat beneficial. Which I think, in a way, they're sort of leaning towards something which I think Israel should do, which is like open up. Since at least there's some Christians in the world that support Israel, they should open up immigration and allow some more pro-Israel Christians to be here, instead of trying to make everyone all Jewish. Just get other people that
Well, they
like
can
them also to
they
come
can
here.
they can also allow the Christians that have been kicked out, the Christian Palestinians,
I
to go back.
I think that would be good.
I mean,
Because the thing is,
inside Israel, don't you? What do you call those two towns that were torn down? Two Christian towns that they keep having demonstrations at. Do you know? Do you know what that is?
no, I don't remember the names of the towns.
Anyway, but yeah, that's it doesn't make sense to me that you would bring Christians from outside when you have Christian Palestinians that either been kicked out or would love to go back, and Israel's
Well,
not
I
allowing
think
them.
I think they should let people who are kicked out also come back. But the thing is, you have a lot of tension between the Jews and the Muslims here. So I figure if there was a stronger Christian community, it would sort of break the tension between the two, and it wouldn't be just like a Jewish-Muslim brawl with a handful of Christians stuck in the middle of it. You could actually have sort of a three-way sort of balance where no
Well,
side
I
is
read
really
a
going to
different
want.
article. The reason I asked this question about why Israel selected to call Christian Palestinians non-Arabs, I read a different article actually that suggested that actually the Palestinian Christians are actually becoming more of a danger to Israel from a public relations point of view than the Muslim Palestinians, in particular the West. They're fanning out throughout the world, going to churches in the West, and they're actually becoming very effective. In fact, the article was saying that even in evangelical churches in the U.S., which was unheard of in the past not to be pro-Israel, they're reaching a point where they're not even allowing pro-Israeli events on the churches because of the uproar it's causing within those churches, and they're accrediting that to Palestinian Christians. And so this article is saying they think that the reason Israel is trying to give the Palestinian Christians more rights is because they see the Christian Palestinians' efforts overseas as actually being very effective. Have you heard anything about that or not really?
Well, what I see is that the Christians have a more of an easy way to talk to the Americans, because most Americans are Christian. So if they see that there's a conflict between Jews and Muslims, they think it's sort of a foreign thing, like, oh, it's like Afghanistan and Iraq. But now when we're talking about Christians from the Holy Land, all of a sudden, they're like, oh, these are our, brothers in faith, and they're being abused under this situation. So they're getting more sympathy. So if Israel feels that they reach out to the Christian community and they say, it's not between us and the Christians, we're actually buddies. It's us and the Muslims. They're causing us the problem.
Yeah, that's basically the article that I read, what it's saying. Harry, you have a comment on this? And we'll wrap up with that.
Not particularly. Not particularly.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a couple of minutes to wrap up about the general discussion anyway. I'll go with you, Harry, since Rafi took the last words.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I just guess I clarified the things I said, that I think that sure, BDS is an important thing, but it's not the most important thing to think about right now as a political topic. The most important thing is the reconciliation, and we'll hear about the government announcement at 1 p.m. tomorrow, Israel time.
Oh, it is 1 p.m.? It's known?
Yeah, definitely. 1 p.m. tomorrow in that time zone, which is 11 p.m. 1 p.m. in Israel, 11 a.m. here in the UK. I think that's really, really important. Another issue is that today the Rafah border crossing opened, which is positive. And I hope that there is a new positive trajectory here of Palestinian unification, and hopefully there
Well, thank you very much, Harry, and we hope to have you back. Rafi, you want to conclude also with a couple of concluding remarks?
Sure. I thought this was a very nice and productive discussion. I think we should go, further on this idea of Palestinians looking to become Israeli citizens. They can still define themselves as Arabs or Palestinians, however they want, but Israel is sort of the country that's controlling everything that's sort of surrounding them anyways. They might as well be citizens of that and, work towards having a more egalitarian society in the country I live. And, I would be open to that, and there's actually a lot of other Israelis I think that would be open to that, as opposed to continuing to have conflicts and negotiations that go nowhere forever.
Well, thank you all, and as I always say, viva la vida, and until next time, hopefully Harry, you'll join us again.
I'd love to.
And Rafi, you're always a welcome guest here.
Thank you.
Until we decide that there are others in Israel like you, I guess we're stuck with you. So,
trying to find you some other interesting guests.
All right, thank you very much, guys.
Pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.